We are going to draw a pine tree first. And what you want to start with is a tree trunk. This is an example of a tree trunk. They are bigger on the bottom and they get smaller as you go up. And the best way to draw that is either you can start at the bottom and you can work your way up, kind of a little bit of a bumpy, not very straight line. You don't want to look like you used a straight edge, and we're definitely not using a straight edge. Or you can start on the top, you can work your way down, a little bit of a bumpy line, not very straight, but wider at the bottom, smaller as you go up. 3 reasons why. This has to be the strong, stable part of the tree to hold up all the weight, so it needs a really wide, strong base. This is the area that's the oldest part of the tree, so it has the most rings for every year it's been growing, and this is like the newest part of the tree. And then you need room for all the roots to come in, because trees are actually bigger underground than they are above ground. So those are the 3 main reasons why tree trunks are bigger at the bottom and smaller as you go up. So room for all the roots, oldest part of the tree, and has to be the really strong part to hold up all of the weight. So start with the tree trunk, and no 2 tree trunks are the same, just like no 2 pine trees are the same. So it could be like, for example, one type of a pine tree is a blue spruce, but no 2 blue spruce pine trees are the same because they all grow from a seed. So if yours does not look exactly like mine, that's okay because no 2 tree trunks are the same. So starting with the tree trunk. When you draw a pine tree, overall the branches tend to get longer and longer as you go down because these are newer branches. They get older as you go down, so they've been growing a lot longer, so they're bigger. And when you draw, I'm going to kind of shake my hand and my fingers as I draw so it looks kind of bumpy and prickly, which is going to seem kind of weird because you've always tried and been taught, oh, you need to hold your hand steady when you draw, or when you're right, you don't want to be moving your hand and your fingers all around, so it's going to seem kind of weird. And as the branches go down, out in nature, things just happen for various reasons, and on trees, they might all of a sudden start growing a new branch like somewhere near the middle. And we're going to go ahead and do something like that because it looks even more natural outside. So when we draw, we're going to draw half of the pine tree first. So what you're going to do is you go down from the top of the tree trunk a little bit, and as you go out, okay, you want to kind of shake your hand and your fingers a little bit as you draw, so it looks kind of like bumpy and prickly like this. Okay, and when you come back, you don't want to touch the tree trunk, so you're kind of going out like this, kind of bumpy and prickly. Now I'm going to go ahead and make one that's like too small out of place. I'm doing that on purpose because that's what happens out in nature. But overall, they're getting longer and longer as I go down, and I'm not touching the tree trunk as I do this. Okay, so I'm kind of going down like this, and then when I come back to here, I go ahead and touch the tree trunk. So it touches here and here. I've got some sticking out the bottom, some sticking out the top. If you go down lower on your paper, that's okay. Some branches are actually dragging or scraping on the ground, so that's something you can do. Okay, so we have one side here. Now the other side is not going to be a mirror image. It's not going to be symmetrical. It's called asymmetrical. That means I'm going to do the same technique, which is how I do it, which is I'm kind of shaking my fingers and my hand as I draw, but I'm not going to say, okay, I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 4 branches down, it's going to be too short out of place. So I'm going to do something different. I'm going to put 2 that are too short out of place, but I'm still going to have them longer as I go down. Okay, I'm not going to try to do the same number of branches. I have, 7 on this side, so I'm not going to try to do 7 here. Because out in nature, 2 sides of trees, they're different. They're asymmetrical. They're not symmetrical. But I'm going to do the same technique. So I'm going to go down from the top, have it connect here, and as I go down, I'm going to kind of, again, wiggle my hand, my fingers, so it looks kind of bumpy and prickly like how pine trees are. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 2 in a row that are like too short out of place. Then I'm going to start getting them longer again as I go down. I'm not going to have the same number of branches that I did before. And then I'm going to go ahead and do one more. So I've got a lot more on this side, and I went down further on this side, which is a natural thing also. So now instead of 1 out of place, I've got 2 that are out of place, but overall they're getting longer as I go down. This side's lower than this side. So I've got more branches on this side. So same technique, but I'm not trying to make them the same. It looks a lot more natural, a lot more realistic like out in nature. So it's going to seem kind of weird, but you know, go ahead and give it a try, see how it goes, like that. So Now, overlapping. What we're going to do first is connect the top two halves together, have a little bit of tree trunk sticking out the top. We're going to connect the bottom two halves together, some kind of a bumpy, crooked looking line like that. So we've got tree trunk at the bottom, some at the top. Okay, so there's some overlapping, and when you look at a tree, you're not going to see all this anymore. A lot of it's going to be covered up by branches and pine needles. You're going to see maybe a couple pieces of tree trunk because trees are see-through, but we're not going to see all that. So what we're going to do first, go up from the bottom, and you want to cut through the tree trunk once, twice. It could be some kind of a bumpy, crooked looking line like this, and then we're going to save this piece. So you can go ahead and shade it in, kind of shade it in a little bit. Then we're going to go up and save one more piece somewhere in this area, doesn't matter where. Go cut through it once, cut through it twice. Go ahead and shade that in. So those are two areas we're going to save. So the rest of this we're going to erase, just saying that they're covered up by smaller branches and pine needles that we cannot see, that are not like drawn yet, but they're there, is what we're saying. So you want to erase all the area in here. Now I'm pushing down kind of hard just so it shows up better for the video, but the goal is to not push so hard we're actually denting the paper. Those are ghost lines, so we want to try to avoid pushing down using the tip of your pencil really hard, you know, kind of like this. You want to try and maybe draw a little more sketchy, but I am kind of denting the paper as I go just so everything's showing up good enough on the video. So we're saying this area, this area, this area is covered up by branches and pine needles that like we have not drawn, but we have a piece sticking out the top, the bottom, so something similar to that. No two trees are the same, so yours does not need to look exactly like this, but we're just going through the techniques and the process of how you do a pine tree that looks more realistic. All right, so next thing, we can add some tree bark. So up here, a couple little lines. Down here, we can add some kind of long squiggly lines. They can crisscross, overlap each other. You don't have to go all the way down with one line like this. You can use some shorter lines that just kind of keep connecting, crisscrossing over each other. Create tree bark. That's a good detail to add. Pieces of tree trunk also count as some detail. Now, for pine needles, there's millions and millions of pine needles, and a great way to do that. A lot of you have probably done counting by doing tick marks. That means like you go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in art, these are called hatching lines, but you don't do the one that crosses over. You just add groups of little lines like this. These are called hatching lines. So what you do is go back in these different areas, and you can add some groups of hatching lines, put some maybe where some of the tree trunk was, put some out in some of these little branches that kind of going out in these areas, just kind of random areas. There's no specific place you have to go, but it is good to put a couple groups on where the tree trunk was. So what you do is you just give the indication of millions of pine needles without having to draw millions of pine needles. So those are good to add. Maybe you want to add little pieces of pine cone sticking out. By the time we add color, get some green, some brown on here. Our goal is to have something that looks a lot more realistic, something that you would have a chance to see outside, something more believable, versus on this handout, we have a pine tree that looks like this as part of the kind of unrealistic, almost cartoon-looking type drawing versus more of a realistic type of drawing that I did down here at the bottom. And then these are ones that I took from student examples. So what we have is we have a pine tree that does not look something like this one. This one, there would be no chance that you would see something growing from a seed out in nature that would look like this. Okay, here there is a chance to find something or see something similar to this that would grow from a seed outside. So by going through the process, we have a pine tree that looks much more realistic as something you can see outside that is something that we can handle at this grade level. So good job going through that process on drawing a pine tree. Excellent.